I remember the first time someone told me a story about one of the people on this list. Not the music, the story behind the music. And I remember sitting there thinking, how is this the same person? How does the same set of hands that made something that beautiful do something like that to the people standing right next to them? That is this list. 10 rock stars. Not the worst people in rock history. We are not doing that. These are 10 specific people who in specific moments made the lives of their own bandmates something between difficult and genuinely terrifying. The people who built the music with them. The people who had no way out. I have been waiting to do this one for a while. Number 10, John Fogerty, Creedence Clearwater Revival. John Fogerty, Creedence Clearwater Revival. And if you have ever had a summer drive with the windows down, Proud Mary, Green River, Bad Moon Rising coming through the speakers, you know exactly what this band meant. You know the feeling. Here is what I did not know, or at least what I did not fully understand, until I started digging into this one. Creedence Clearwater Revival did not function the way most bands function. Not even close. One writer described it in a way that I have not been able to shake. He said Creedence did not have band meetings. Creedence was a benevolent dictatorship, in which the will of the rhythm section yielded to the decree of the flannel-shirted leader. That is John Fogerty, the flannel-shirted leader. He wrote the songs, he sang the songs, he produced the records. He controlled the sound, the aesthetic, the direction. The other 3 members of that band, including Tom Fogerty, his own older brother, who had been playing alongside him since 1959, were given very little space in the room where those decisions were made. And for a while, that arrangement produced some of the most concentrated run of hit records that any band managed at the turn of the 70s. But music made under total control of one person tends to collapse when the cracks start to form. And Tom Fogerty was the first crack. He quit in early 1971. John's older brother, a founding member, done with it. And here is the part that still gets me when I think about this story. What happened next? For the band's final album, Mardi Gras 1972, John Fogerty flipped the script entirely. Suddenly, Stu Cook and Doug Clifford, the rhythm section that had been largely shut out of the creative process for years, were expected to write and sing their own material. The guys who had been passengers for the whole run, now it was on them. Some people still argue about whether that was a miscalculation or something more deliberate. Whether Fogerty knew exactly what he was doing, proving, one last time, what the arrangement had always really been. The album was not good. The band was done within the year. Number 9, Scott Weiland, Stone Temple Pilots. Scott Weiland died in 2015, and he had real demons that were bigger than his ability to handle them, and I am not standing here to minimize what addiction costs a person. But this is a list about what rock stars did to the people around them. And what Weiland did to Stone Temple Pilots over and over again for more than 20 years, I think deserves to be named. Stone Temple Pilots, Core, 1992. More than 8 million copies in the United States. Plush, Creep, Wicked Garden, Interstate Love Song. Music that hit a specific generation in a specific place. You know this if you were there. And through all of it, through the tours and the albums and the time apart and the coming back together, Robert DeLeo and Dean DeLeo and Eric Kretz were holding a band together around a frontman whose relationship with sobriety was, at best, complicated. And at worst, it took the whole machine down with it. Robert DeLeo said something in an interview after the firing that I have thought about many times since I read it. He said they had always looked out for Scott's best interests. He said they had tried to be a great friend to someone who did not really care to be friends with them. I want you to sit with that for a second. The bassist of your band saying that publicly about your lead singer. In February 2013, the band fired Weiland. The announcement was a single sentence in a press release, and Scott Weiland found out he had been fired the same way the rest of the world did, by reading about it online. He said he could not understand how he could be terminated from a band he had founded, and I know what you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. All those songs, all that music, a one-sentence press release. And a man who learned he was out of his own band from a website. The music was extraordinary. The gap between what the music was and what the reality was, that is the thing. Number 8. Syd Barrett. Pink Floyd's Syd Barrett was the reason Pink Floyd existed. He named the band. He wrote the early songs. He was the one people came to see. And somewhere around 1967, something began to shift in him. Publicly, visibly, in ways that nobody around him knew how to stop. I am not going to tell you this story as a failure. Because it was not a failure. It was something much more complicated and much harder to categorize. What happened to Syd Barrett at the height of Pink Floyd's early success is one of the more devastating stories in all of rock music, and some of what he did to the people around him during that period I think can only be understood in that context. David Gilmour, who was Syd's childhood friend before he was ever in this band, watched him from the side of the stage one night in 1967 and said afterward that Syd did not seem to recognize him, that he just stared back, and that he would go on record saying that was when Syd changed. On stage, Barrett would sometimes stop playing mid-song, just stop, stand there. Other times he would detune his guitar, note by note, while the band was still performing around him, not breaking down, not stopping, just detuning until the instrument was useless, and then keep standing there with it. And if you have ever been on stage with someone and had no idea what they were about to do, you know that this is not abstract. You know what that specific kind of dread feels like. And here is the part I did not know until I started digging into this one. And I wish I had known sooner.
Got a flip-top, pack of cigarettes in the pocket, feeling good at the top, shopping.
In the final weeks before Syd left the band, he started bringing in a new song to rehearsals. A song called Have You Got It Yet? And every time the band tried to learn it, he would change it. Quietly, subtly, different chords, different structure, different key.
More, please. The Pink Floyd.
And then he would turn to them and ask, with complete calm, have you got it yet? They never got it. There was nothing to get. The song was designed to be impossible to learn. Nick Mason, Pink Floyd's drummer, wrote about this in his own memoir. He called it an exercise in pure Dadaist anti-pedagogy. I do not know if I have ever read a more heartbreaking or more precise description of anything. For a show in Southampton, the band simply did not drive to Syd's house to pick him up. They went without him. That was how it ended. I do not know if this counts as terrorizing. I think it counts as something sadder and more true. Number 7, Jim Morrison, The Doors Here. Is the thing about the Doors that I think people do not fully understand when they look back at them from this distance. The four of them genuinely loved each other. Ray Manzarek became something like a father figure to Morrison almost from the beginning. They met at UCLA Film School. Ray saw something in Jim that made him want to build something with him, and they did. They built one of the most singular bands that rock music has ever produced. And there were two Jim Morrisons. Krieger talked about this in his memoir, and he was precise about it. He called them Jim and Jimbo. The Jim version, the one that existed before the drink started in earnest, was thoughtful, brilliant, genuinely creative. Krieger said his own parents loved him. He was, in those moments, easy to be around. And then Jimbo came around. When Jimbo showed up, Ray Manzarek's house was the first thing to go. Not once, multiple times. Morrison trashed it, destroyed it, ran through the goodwill that Ray and Dorothy Manzarek had extended to him like there was no bottom to it. And Krieger described this with the specific kind of sadness of someone who watched a person they genuinely loved become someone they did not recognize. But the moment that ended the Doors as a live band, the moment that changed the geometry of everything they had built, was March 1969, a show in Miami. Morrison was deep in one of his worst stretches. What happened on that stage that night resulted in an arrest, a conviction on lesser charges, and a concert ban that spread across enough of the country that the Doors effectively could not tour anymore. And I know you know this feeling, when someone you are tied to, professionally, artistically, as a friend, does something that lands not just on them, when their choices become your consequences, when the thing that they did follows you somewhere you did not go. Ray Manzarek spent years after Morrison's death defending the band, defending Jim, talking about the genius and the vision and the music. Every time I think about that, I come back to the house, the one they let Jim live in, the one he destroyed. Some people love you even after you have wrecked something of theirs. Number 6, Dave Mustaine, Metallica. I have told this story more times in real life than almost anything else on this list, because there is a detail in it, one specific thing, that every time I get to it, the person I am talking to goes completely still. The mother of all that is evil. 1983. You know the broad version of this. Mustaine was fired, formed Megadeth, produced one of the most impressive acts of creative revenge in the history of hard rock music. That part is well documented. But the outline skips the part that actually matters. Mustaine joined Metallica in 1981, and the people who were around that band from the beginning said the same thing. He was an incredibly talented guitarist. And then immediately after they said that, they said he had an enormous problem with alcohol, and that when he was drinking, he became violent and completely unhinged. Those are the words they use: violent, unhinged. Mustaine himself described it this way. He said he would drink and have fun until someone refuted something he had said. And then, in his own words, that was war, baby. Here is what war looked like. During one rehearsal, Mustaine brought his dog. The dog jumped onto bassist Ron McGovney's car and scratched the paint. James Hetfield, in the chaos, yelled at the dog. That is all Hetfield did, yell at the dog. Mustaine responded by physically attacking Hetfield and going verbally after Lars Ulrich. Over the dog. But that is not the detail that stops people. At some point in this period, Mustaine, who had been drinking, poured a full can of beer directly down the neck of McGovney's bass guitar and into the pickups. And when McGovney went to play it, the electrical shock blew him across the room. A can of beer, poured into the pickups. While the man was standing there, McGovney left the band shortly after. Mustaine was officially fired on April 11, 1983. The way it went was this. Hetfield, Ulrich, and Cliff Burton woke him up at 9 in the morning. He was suffering from a bad hangover. They told him he was out. And then they told him he was not flying back to California with them. They had bought him a bus ticket. He had 1 hour to pack a bag. 4 days on a bus. From New York to Los Angeles. He said he wanted blood. He went home and channeled every ounce of it into Megadeth. And Megadeth was extraordinary. But somewhere inside all of that is still Ron McGovney, picking up the bass. The moment the current hit him. Number 5. Keith Moon, The Who. Roger Daltrey said something about Moon that I think is one of the most perfect rock quotes I have ever come across. He said, even at his worst, Keith Moon was amazing. And then he added that in the early days of the band, the two of them were arch-enemies. The arch-enemies part is what nobody talks about enough. Moon was extraordinary. There has never been a drummer like him, and there probably never will be. But being in a tour van with Keith Moon, being in a hotel hallway, being on stage next to him, this required a very specific kind of temperament, and Pete Townshend was the one who paid the most direct physical price. On the band's first major American tour, Moon arrived with 500 cherry bombs. Not a few, 500. He had a full case. Townshend discovered this and, in his own words, described having genuine fear in his eyes when Moon opened it up and showed him. The cherry bombs went into hotel toilets, changing rooms, ninth-floor plumbing fixtures of actual hotels. There is a story about the Gorsham Hotel in 1968, where Townshend went to use the bathroom in Moon's room and discovered there was no toilet left. Just, in Townshend's words, an S-bend. All that was left was the S-bend. 500 cherry bombs. One tour. But there is the moment that actually cost something permanent. The Who were performing live on national television, playing My Generation, one of the most perfectly coiled rock songs ever written. And as the final notes arrived, Moon's bass drum exploded. Not a metaphor, a literal explosion. Moon had packed a device inside the drum. The force was powerful enough to set Townshend's hair on fire. It permanently damaged his hearing in one ear. He has attributed that specific moment, in interviews over decades, to his partial deafness today. Moon himself took a cut from a flying cymbal, and I know you just smiled. I know you did, because I did the same thing when I first heard this story, and then I felt a little bit bad about it. Because Townshend's hearing, that is real. That is a real thing that happened and never stopped happening. Even at his worst, Keith Moon was amazing. Number 4. Liam Gallagher, Oasis. I do not think there has been a more simultaneously entertaining and genuinely exhausting sibling dynamic in the history of rock music. They will both tell you they have been at each other's throats since before Liam could walk. And through all of it, through every incident, every walkout, every thrown object, they made some of the best guitar music of the 90s. You know that. You have heard it. But entertainment has a ceiling, and Liam Gallagher has a gift for finding it. September 1994, the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. Oasis is on their first full American tour. During a performance of Live Forever, Noel's song, one of the best songs of that year, Liam decides to change the lyrics, mockingly, right there on stage. And then he throws a tambourine at Noel's head. An actual tambourine at his brother's head, mid-song. And then he walks off before the set is finished. Noel quit the band the next day, flew to San Francisco. He has talked about a woman he met there, someone who took care of him for a while, and he wrote Talk Tonight for her. He came back. They always came back. But then there was the cricket bat. During the recording of What's the Story Morning Glory in 1995, which I want to remind you contains Wonderwall, Don't Look Back in Anger, and Champagne Supernova. There was a fight, a physical fight. An actual cricket bat was involved. I want you to sit with the image of two brothers in a recording studio at the peak of their creative powers, fighting with a cricket bat. And somewhere on the other side of that session, those songs exist. Then Barcelona, 2000. Liam said something about the legitimacy of Noel's daughter. Noel has said in interviews that he never forgave him for it, and that he never got an apology. And in 2009, at a festival in Paris, a fight started, and Liam smashed one of Noel's guitars. That was the last one. I'm silent, talking on my phone. Noel's statement when he quit: "I simply could not go on working with Liam a day longer. He is like a man with a fork in a world of soup. A man with a fork in a world of soup. I have never heard a more perfectly devastated, perfectly precise way to describe anything in my life. The tragedy and the comedy of it in exactly the same sentence." Number 3. Roger Waters. Pink Floyd Roger Waters made some of the most important music of the 20th century. The Wall, The Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here. These are not just records, they are events. I am not here to diminish any of that, but the way he treated the people around him in the process of making that music is a story that I think deserves to be told directly and clearly, without softening it. Richard Wright, Pink Floyd's keyboard player, the man who wrote The Great Gig in the Sky and Us and Them. The man who, after his death, David Gilmour said had his enormous contribution frequently forgotten in the welter of arguments about who or what was Pink Floyd. By 1979, by the time the band was recording The Wall, Waters had become convinced that Pink Floyd was, in practical terms, him and only him. And Bob Ezrin, the record's producer, a man who was in those sessions, who watched it happen up close, said something afterward that I have not been able to shake. He said Wright was a victim of what he called Roger's almost Teutonic cruelty, that no matter what Rick did, it did not seem to be good enough for Roger. And that it was clear to him that Roger was not interested in Rick succeeding. Those are the words of the man in the room. Wright was forced out. But here is how it actually happened. Waters told him directly, "If you do not resign from Pink Floyd, I will take The Wall, the recorded album, the entire project, and release it as a solo record. Leave the band with nothing." Wright resigned. He was then rehired, immediately, for the Wall tour, as a salaried session musician, paid by the week, for a band he had been in since the beginning.
10 years have got behind you, no one told.
Nick Mason said years later that Wright was the only member who actually made money on that Wall tour. And when Waters later claimed, publicly, that the band had created a toxic environment for him, that he had been the one suffering, Mason said something I have to give you directly. He said, "It is hard to imagine being mean to Roger. Stalin was the bullied. This is the story I mentioned at the beginning of this list." The one about what a bandmate actually owes you, not just a job description, a thing one person owes to another person they have built something with. Richard Wright died in 2008. He was not fully reinstated as a member of Pink Floyd until close to the end of his life. Number 2. John Lennon, The Beatles. The breakup, the lawsuits, the diss tracks. How Do You Sleep, where Lennon wrote "The Only Thing You Done Was Yesterday," and George Harrison sat in and played the guitar solo on it like a man cheerfully settling someone else's debt. But I want to talk about what happened before all of that, when they were still a band. By 1968, the seams were visible. The White Album sessions were tense in ways that the music somehow managed to conceal.
I hope someday you'll join us.
And John Lennon, the creative engine, the voice, the guy who had written Help and In My Life and A Day in the Life, had started checking out. Not physically, he was present, but he was communicating with his bandmates increasingly through Yoko Ono.
Living life in peace.
Letting her speak in band meetings, letting her be the voice in the room. And if you have ever been in a creative partnership where one person has imported someone else's authority into the center of it, you understand the atmosphere that creates. Ringo Starr was the first to break. He walked out during the White Album sessions in August of 1968. He said afterward, "I felt two things. I felt I was not playing well, and I felt that the other three were happy and I was an outsider." He was gone for 2 weeks. The band covered his drums in flowers when he came back. But the moment that haunts this story, the moment I keep returning to, is January 10th, 1969. Twickenham Film Studios. The Let It Be sessions. George Harrison had been frustrated for years. His songs had been largely sidelined. Lennon had been increasingly dismissive. The combination of that history and whatever happened over lunch that day came to a head, and George Harrison stood up from the table and said, with a specific flatness that I can only describe as someone who has run all the way out of something, "I think I will be leaving the band now. Get a replacement. Right into the enemy and get a few people." He walked out. He was the second Beatle to quit in 6 months. After Harrison left the sessions, Lennon reportedly reached out to Eric Clapton about the possibility of replacing him, his bandmate of 8 years, his musical brother since they were teenagers. And he was making calls within the week. George came back. They made Abbey Road. They gave us one more extraordinary thing before it was over. But somewhere in all of that is still the lunch table, and the sound of a chair pushed back, and the walk through the cold. Number 1. Axl Rose. Guns N' Roses. 140 seconds, you know Welcome to the Jungle. You know Appetite for Destruction, which is one of the greatest rock records anyone has ever made in any era. And I mean that without a single qualification. That is not what this story is about. This is about what it cost the people who stood beside him to make it. Here is the moment I always come back to. October 18th, 1989. Guns N' Roses are about to open for the Rolling Stones at the LA Memorial Coliseum. They have not played a single note. And Axl Rose walks to a microphone, faces the crowd, his own crowd, the people who came for him, and says that unless certain people in this band get their act together, these will be the last Guns N' Roses shows they will ever see. To the crowd, about his bandmates, before the first song. Slash said later he never forgave him for it. And here is the part I was not prepared for. That moment is not the exception. That moment is the pattern made visible. July 2nd, 1991. Riverport Amphitheater outside St. Louis. 2 hours in. A fan in the crowd has a camera. Security does not move. Rose dives into the crowd himself. Comes back to the stage. Tells everyone the security is lame-ass and he is going home. Walks off. The band follows. A riot starts. 65 people injured. $300,000 of damage. Steven Adler, the original drummer, the one who plays on every track on Appetite, was fired in 1990. Izzy Stradlin quit in 1991. Slash was gone by 1996. By the end of the decade, every original member had walked away. And you know this feeling. Someone capable of something extraordinary who could not hold it together long enough to let the people beside him breathe. The last Guns N' Roses shows you will ever see. He did not mean it. But some promises keep themselves.